Um, Hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Today marks the first flagship event called BizFest, and for today's webinar, we have two of our very esteemed guests, Vipul and Suhas. They are both professionals in the product management industry, and here we've called them here today to um, so that they can bestow their elite knowledge on us and on our viewers. Vipul, Suhas, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much, Aditya.
Thanks, Aditya, for having us and for those kind words.
Awesome. I think, Aditya, time to get started in case we're on stage. I'll take that as a cue and kick this off.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Aditya, for that wonderful intro. And Vipul, glad to see you here as well. To kick off things, I'll just quickly introduce Vipul's profile. Vipul's my senior from my first company, but has had an illustrious career post that. He's currently heading product at Zenius Education. He's had stints with Flipkart for a pretty long time, I'd say, 4 full years at Flipkart. A small stint with Nearby, and started off in business intelligence with a company called Thorogood Associates. You guys can post all your questions, anything around data analytics, consulting, product management, how he's grown in his career. Any questions that you guys have, feel free to put it in the chat section, and we'll be taking up most of them if time permits. But to kick things off, Vipul, I know a little bit about that career, shared a little bit with our audience, but do you want to go a little deeper, share, how you made those transitions, why you made those transitions, and what today's career for you looks like, just so that our audience knows you a little better.
Thanks, Suhas. Well, I like to be honest. I have stumbled upon most of it as I went along. At the right moments, whatever felt right to me is how I transitioned. But started with business intelligence and analytics, as you mentioned, with Thorogood. But it was after a small stint in Europe with a client where I figured that product might be a better fit for me out of a few people that I was working with there suggested, and that's how I started figuring out back in 2015 beginning that I should move to product management. Um Initially, it was a struggle because it was new in India at that point, as well as unproven experience was difficult to convert into actual roles. But yeah, Nearby was kind enough to give me that opportunity. Spent 2 years with them, just hustling through, learning new things, and with the right mentorship that came along, I just made the journey easier. And post that, Flipkart happened, where I was actually interested on the consumer side of the product management. It was serendipitous as well. And after that, just was lucky enough to be working on interesting and challenging sets of problem statements at Flipkart, be it building one of the first mobile web platforms in the country and one of the best ones in e-commerce. Apart from building and then growing mobiles as a category, and very recently got a chance to build Flipkart's entertainment destination as videos. Uh, it threw a lot of interesting challenges towards me, and I'm just glad that I got those opportunities to be working on them. Right now, have moved to EdTech, based out of Indonesia. So exciting times.
Awesome, Vipul, and we'll definitely jump a little deeper into that. And I'm sure everyone here on this call has heard about this company. Has most of us would have used, bought stuff off Flipkart. So really looking forward to some of those interesting anecdotes. So how I'm looking at it, I do have a couple of questions, some around product and biz at Flipkart or in general that our audience can learn from. And the second bit would be around for folks looking to break into PM or grow their careers. I think I'm assuming most of it is going to be um, college audience. So we'll talk about some tips and tricks for people to break into companies like the ones that you worked at. I'm sure it's a dream company for a lot of them. So to start off on the first bit, um you mentioned a bunch of projects at Flipkart. Which one of them was your favorite and why?
It's something that I have to answer in interviews as well. So, no, the most interesting from a recency perspective was Flipkart's entertainment destination. But I think the first child is always the favorite one. So, building out mobile web when the India's internet economy was booming, and a lot more users after the geo revolution in 2016 were coming online. I was sitting on a product in 2017. Mobile web was an unknown entity. In fact, Google was also trying to build out Chrome at that point for mobile web. So that was the most interesting and also technically a lot more challenging project that I had to work on.
Nice, nice. And at Flipkart, I'm sure you would have seen lots and lots of data coming in.
Mhm.
How did you really pick, hey, this is something that we should go after, right? Say, let it be the mobile product that you worked on, or the recent shift in like an OTT based entertainment platform, right? Very unlike a traditional e-commerce thing that you guys started with. So often there are lots of ideas. As product managers, we don't have a constraint on the number of ideas. But how do you really pick that one idea to go behind and not just build everything and do like a feature overload out there?
Got it. I'll pick on the mobile web side of the world. That's, I think, a lot more relatable to all of us. We now see mobile web, progressive web apps, as they are called now, available everywhere. Uh, so if I had to break this down, right, I'll break it down into two parts, especially with Flipkart, right? If you look at it, it was about how can we look at the macro trends in the market and try to understand how the user behavior is moving. So the first step is not always to look at the internal data. It's first trying to understand what the landscape is like and how the audience and the market is changing. And as I said, right, with geo coming in, it took almost all of the internet companies to realize that there is a need for everyone to be present on mobile. Earlier, the focus used to be desktop. Of course, mobile app was the go-to place. But then the other data set and research, if you would look at that point, was the fact that our per capita income in the country was still slow, right? So people didn't have the most advanced phones. In fact, the phone capacities as well were really low at that point. So there was a natural tendency for users to either be searching for things on their mobile, but not wanting to keep a mobile app. So that's the macro picture of it that you look at. Uh, and then you come to the micro picture of it, which is the internal data, where you start seeing what the transition is looking like in terms of users coming to your own platform. And you start tracking the sources of places where the users are coming to you. And I think that moment where we could triangulate and come back to the table and say that, hey, you know what, this is something that we have to invest in. So coming back to your original question, while I used an example here, a product manager has to make sure that they are looking at the landscape, they are looking at the competition, and they're also trying to project what the macro trend might look like. Because if you start building something today, you have to build for the future, and hence you have to be in sync and be able to build some hypotheses and take some bets. That's really important. And at the same time, you have to start looking at your internal data and then be able to map it with the macro trends. That becomes very, very critical, and something that takes a few take a few years to learn. Not something that uh, I learned overnight. Took me some time as well. I'll be honest. I had amazing mentorship to go along with it. But that's broadly how I frame almost every problem statement that comes to me, especially when it comes to the consumer space.
Very interesting. No, absolutely. I agree with you. I think it's very, very important to look at both the micro and the macro factors. And rightly pointed out, it is more about the user. Definitely build for what exactly, Did you guys do a lot of user research at Flipkart? How did that process really look like? Given that you have an enormous amount of data also, right? So what is data-driven product management versus gut-driven for you?
So, a lot of gut comes from the confidence of knowing and understanding the macro,
Hmm.
right? But data really comes in handy and really comes in play when you're looking to build a 10 to 100 product, because what happens is when you're building something from scratch, you go with a gut, you go with your hypothesis, you put it out in front of the users. Some like it, some don't like it, you get some early feedback, you iterate, and then you let it drive on its own and grow to a certain scale. But you can't grow more unless you start looking at the data, and that's where defining what a user funnel will look like. If I got 100 users, actually what did they do on the platform becomes super critical. So so being able to know the data from building just user funnels, also behavioral analysis. For example, if a user bought mobile phones, what are the other things that they considered before they actually decide to just buy a mobile phone, becomes very
Right.
critical for you to behaviorally analyze as well. So that's the second aspect of it. Now, coming to user research, was user research, and that primarily came from the ethos that it's a customer first company. And uh, and 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 user research is an important partner to any product manager, because uh, well, there are two ways to do user research, right? One is that you do it in a dirty way, and when I say a dirty way, in the sense that you do it quick, which is you figure out who are the 50 people that I can talk to, which represent my user set, and I can try to extract information and then build hypotheses that can help me get to building something that will be valuable. And then, of course, the other more structured way of doing user research is you first define and decide what's your thesis, what's the value proposition, and then you prepare a script. Then you go recruit a bunch of users who may be using your product and may not be using your product, because it's important to get a pulse of both the sets. Because the ones who are using your product, you want to make sure that they start using it more, and the ones who are not using your product, you want to make sure that they start using it. So you build that thesis, you build that script, you recruit a bunch of users, and you start sitting down with them, 1 hour, 2 hour a day with each user, and then you start preparing your assumptions and the insights that come from there. In fact, uh, uh, when I started, uh, I was a little constrained on the user research bandwidth, and there's a funny incident that happened. I was traveling via train in UP, and it was a 6 hour ride. So I was like, why not try to talk to the tier one, tier two, tier three audience that's sitting in this train? I anyway have 6 hours to kill. And in fact, I've done my user research in a train as well, where I just went around talking to people sitting in different coaches, trying to understand what do they use on their phone, how do they shop, what do they search for, and how can I be a picture in their life. So that was a fun ride. So there are different ways a product manager can approach user research, but hypothesis driven and preparing what you want to know beforehand helps a lot more than going to a user and saying, hey, would you use this? Because if the user is very nice, he or she will always tell you that they will. And if they are not nice, the answer will completely depend.
Got it. No, thanks so much for sharing that. I think that was insightful. Just as we transition to the second segment of this, Vipul, what does the day in the life of a PM really look like? Like, in case I wouldn't say it's 9 to 6, because I know very few PMs work 9 to 6, but say you're going to work, and I know that very few days will look similar, but
Mhm.
if you could draw a pattern, what would the day in the life of Vipul at Flipkart, or Vipul at Nearby, or Vipul at Zenius really look like?
Yeah, well, you rightly said, right? It looks very varied. day to day, but if you had to average it out, uh, a certain percentage of the time for a PM should always be spent in trying to get the pulse of your users. So be it talking to users, be it trying to understand your current data, be it trying to understand what the future might look like for this user set. That's an important percentage of your time that you should be spending there. In fact, one of the key habits that I learned as a PM from my seniors was that every day morning, the first thing you should be looking at is your data dashboard. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is basically communicating and working with your stakeholders, which is very important, because if you are a PM who's trying to deliver a revenue or a business outcome, it's not completely driven by your users. It's also driven by your stakeholders, people that you work with. So there should always be a certain percentage that we spend there. Of course, a product manager's life is very heavily dependent on your design and engineering counterparts. And that's the third part that you should focus on. And that's where some of that time gets spent, where you're talking about what you have to build, what you're building on right now. So you are executing, so you spend time there. And lastly, but not the least important, but lastly, the other set should also be focused on figuring out what you want to do next, because planning is one of the other critical aspects of a PM's job. You can't run just day to day. You have to be able to plan for next year, and then as you grow, you have to be able to plan for the next 6 months, next 1 year. So that's in summary what it looks like on an average. Of course, a combination of these things, when they happen together on the same day, it looks really chaotic. and and if it spreads out and is planned better, then it just feels nice when you're getting the right feedback, when you're getting the right metric, when you're seeing your numbers, revenues growing. So PM's life is how do I put this mildly? A saying that we used to have in Flipkart is that PM has an infinite bandwidth. So a typical day never ends, basically for a PM. But those are the four key things that you spend your time on.
Very interesting. Thanks for sharing that, Vipul. And down to the most important one for the current audience, right? So, if anyone in our audience is interested to break into product, yes, there are lots of resources out there. I'm sure many of them are probably following, a bunch of, communities. There are enough videos on YouTube. There are books out there, but there's still a certain gap into someone who's really trying to break into product, right? That's where there exists lots of people trying to help you. So
Yeah.
what are your top three tips for people looking to break in, and hopefully something that they can apply in the next coming month? I think it is recruitment season, so it'll be super useful for them.
Got it. So I'll maybe narrate it from my personal experience on hiring, as well as my own experience of going through a few hiring cycles myself. One of the key things that any PM should have is basically problem solving ability. That now that's easier said than done, right? So a critical tip that I learned over the years, something that I've seen great PMs to be able to execute, is how can you take a problem statement and start breaking it down. Uh, and this is something that you can practice on your own, right? You can pick up any app that you like or you don't like, and then try identifying what can change in this, which can improve my life if I like that app, or what are the things that I can improve in a platform which will improve its value to the users. So that's one of the ways to uh, one of the key things to think about, which is pick a problem and try to solve it independently on your own. And I'm sure you will figure out, if you go to the internet, you will find out a lot of other people have might try to solve a similar problem. So see how they approach that problem, because uh, approaching the problem is the most important aspect. Breaking it down is the most important aspect that any PM who's hiring would look for. They won't look for the right answers. They will not look for the most jazziest thing that you can say, but most importantly, they will look for uh, they will definitely look for how do you approach that problem statement and break it down. So that's one key thing that you should practice independently. Uh, the second thing that I really value is someone who can communicate their idea as well. So it's not about the language, it's about taking a pause, thinking about what you want to say, and then framing that in a way that can help the other side understand well. And that's something that comes with practice. Like simply speaking, if you're ever interviewing, one of the things that you should think about is, can I take a minute? Can I put down these three things that I'm thinking about? And can I also make them cohesive so that it flows in the conversation automatically? And then presenting your ideas and thoughts becomes very critical because you work with a PM works with a variety of people. So that's something that you should be able to do, and you should be able to do that easily. Uh, I'm not going to quote the third thing as design or technical aspects, because when you're beginning your career, those are things that you can learn. Uh, but one of the things that I really enjoy when I talk to a PM, especially the one that I'm interviewing, is if they have that skill set of being able to understand data. I know that not a lot of us in the very beginning of our career have worked with a lot of data, but just being able to think of what the numerator and what the denominator represents, and then what the root cause of the numerator growing, or what the root cause of the denominator diminishing or growing can be, can help you figure out your data even better when we look at user funnels or we look at revenue metrics. So that's an important aspect, being able to question what can change this. And that's a key consideration that I have whenever I am interviewing, and something that I found really helpful. And that's something that you can also do as an exercise on the internet very, very easily, where you can figure out data-based problem statements for PMs. And you should just practice. You should look at the question. You should try to think about it for a few minutes, and then structure your answers, and then see how does it compare with the solution that's presented, because it's not about learning what's been solved there. It's about thinking how to solve for it. So those are the key top three things that I
Awesome.
would look at.
Awesome. No, no, absolutely. I think to summarize that, I think nailed it, like the practice bit. And actually, just to add on, if someone is looking to, on point 1 and 3, if you guys are looking for problem statements, I think at the product folks, we do this tear down series every month. We've hosted real problem statements, partnered with companies like Oyo, Dunzo, Gruffers, right? And the winners get direct interview opportunities. And it's exactly this, right? Think of it as B school case study competition. So if you are looking to, actually practice, many times it's like, hey, do I like pick up guesstimate questions, or do I want to work on real product problems? So in case you're looking for a starting point, definitely check out, it's called theproductfolks.com/teardowns. And yeah, practice is something that will help you. You'll be a lot more confident in your interviews, so do check that out.
I think so. As that's a great segue for me to now come in,
Right.
because there is the product folks connection that you have, but I think you also have had quite an interesting journey. So for my audience, I would like to quickly summarize that before I, you know, uh, let you explain that a little more. So you've been with PepsiCo for a while now. Before that, you were with Thorogood Associates. We didn't share the time together, but we had independent times where we worked at the same projects as well. Uh, and with PepsiCo, you've been building a bunch of internal tools on their finance and the innovation team. Some of that I know of are quite interesting, and the size of the products that you've been building is immense. And I would definitely like to understand a bit more on that. And on the side, you've been managing Product Folks, which is India's one of the largest volunteer-driven communities. And you also have been building a suite of productivity apps called Indistract to help people fight the digital distraction that has seeped in all our lives. So, Suhas, help us understand a bit more on, the three aspects that I talked about. You've been building a community, you've been building indie apps, and of course PepsiCo as well.
Absolutely. No, thanks so much, Vipul. You probably covered all of it, but I'll probably just I'll connect the dots there.
Sure.
Um, PepsiCo is where I work full time. I think this transition happened in 2019, and I moved to Europe. Um, this is very closely linked to our first role as well. We started off as BI consultants, worked with CPG clients. So this is very closely linked to that role. But it's an interesting journey building out internal products right here, um, helping them make financial decisions, reporting layers. So it's a very interesting journey here. Why I started product folks on the side. So one is my full-time role, one is a community, and one is a side project. Um, product folks, I think, is something that all of us really link with and relate with. Like I was sharing, I think lots and lots of people looking to transition to product, and our aim was, can we really be that place where people can just come connect? Lots of people have small doubts like, hey, what do I do? Want to connect, want to network, want to learn. Even after you learn, want to probably switch jobs. So there are lots of things that can be done here, and we just wanted to be that one destination when we started off. So that was the idea. That was about 2 years ago as well. And I think we've come a long way. Started off with offline events across 9 cities. We did about 70 plus events. In the pandemic, switched everything to online, and that actually helped us scale because we were able to host people from the Valley, people from Europe, people from Southeast Asia. We had the India chapters going, so that moved online, and that really removed the geographical barrier. Right, you can host anyone sitting anywhere. People can attend, at the tip of their phones, right? So tip of their hands. So that was very interesting for us. That brought in some amount of skill, and also that. What I see is everyone wants to transition to product today. So I think it's just a perfect time to be building out this community and lots of learnings as we go, right? Today, I think it's not been a solo journey for sure. Found a bunch of interesting volunteers early on who still stick around to help build different verticals, right? We have at least 11 initiatives going on, 3 more coming in, and everything volunteer driven, right? So that's been one huge learning for me on aligning incentives. Lots of things can be aligned to exactly how you run a startup, but I think interesting learnings there. And the side project is a personal favorite because I've been interested in the productivity space. And when we started off, it was to solve for ourselves. Like, hey, I'm stuck to my phone. What can I do about it, right? So the awareness is there, and what we noticed, a lot more people were in that same phase, right? People are talking about it, people were writing about it on Reddit, on HN. There were a couple of other apps coming out. And a friend of mine was the one who developed the app. So we were just jamming, and it's been a very interesting journey. Given that I think Netflix also published Social Dilemma, so now a lot more people today recognize it. I'm sure there are some people listening to this as well. So in case you guys want to really try a minimalist approach to this, do check out. It's called Indistractable. In case you search for it on your Play Store, it's only on Android today, but it's still in beta. So would love to hear your feedback. And the idea with that is, can we build a suite of productivity apps to help you fight digital distraction? That is the idea, right? Instead of being stuck on your phone for 3 hours, you want to do something about it, but I mean, uh, they the big four companies have spent a decade helping you get, they're socially engineered, they've spent billions of dollars to help you get stuck to your phone. So it's not going to be easy, and we're just doing a small part to help you, aid that journey to fight that digital distraction. We're not there yet. We're also learning. It's just a very tiny 2-member team. But yeah, with that, I'll close the intro. I think it was a little long, but I hope that gives a
No,
little more insight.
no, I think definitely gives our audience a little more insight on how your journey has been. So I'll maybe take it from the top, from your full-time role right now. You also made the transition from consulting to product, and you work for a very big company right now. So tell us a little bit more about what does an internal PM or a product manager in a company like PepsiCo, when
Got
you talk about the finance product or the other products that you're building, how
it.
does
Right.
that look like? What does that look like when somebody joins a company like this and has to build, innovation internally?
Got it. I think when you join a large company, um, it takes some time to really understand a lot of things, right? Unlike when it's an early stage company, I think things are moving, people are figuring it out. The mandate changes pretty rapidly. Here I think there is a lot more structure that goes into, a lot more thinking that goes pretty deep, right? They aren't planning for the next quarter, they aren't planning to survive, right? They have mandates that are right up to 2025, so lots and lots of planning. That is one learning. And the second learning, I moved from a very early stage startup to the other end of the spectrum. The stint in between PepsiCo and Thorogood was with a edtech. It's a YC company. It's called Pragmatic. Um, so that transition was very interesting, right? You go from consulting to being employee number one at an early stage startup to the other end of the spectrum. So I think that transition was super interesting for two reasons, right? I've shifted geography. I moved from India to Europe, and I shifted from being at a company that was a size of 10 employees to thousands, right? Like we have tons of employees here. So I think that was really interesting for me, because I really didn't understand internal products before this, right? The importance, yes, lots of people spoke about B2B product. I didn't have a first-hand experience of that, but now I do understand it a little bit, right? So I still feel like there's so much to do, there's so much to do in this entire space. And so many interesting startups coming up trying to help solve some gaps that are here. So lots of opportunity, and these are two learnings from the outside that I have. Um, Unlike consumer side, I think you've probably faced a lot of consumers. So I think there are lots of differences. We could do an entire session on B2C versus B2B versus internal products. But these are my
Yeah.
two major learnings that I've come across in the last 1.5, 2 years here.
Got it. Got it. So just for the context of our audience, what I would like to understand is who's an internal products user, and
Sure.
and how do you actually, in a quick summary, if you could describe how do you go about building a product for your internal users?
Sure. It's not very different in terms of the user research that you mentioned, but I feel it's a little easier given that there's a finite statement. I know who I need to talk to, right? Uh, that is point number one. And point number two is um, there is some amount of structure to this. That's how I feel, right? I'm not starting from a blank slate
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes, right? You
Mm-hmm.
know what your problem statement is, you know who your users are. That I find like, and especially I can draw parallels today itself, right? I'm building Indistractable versus this. In Indistractable, I'm building for like bunch of personas, right? Bunch of personas. But here, that is pretty much defined for me, right? You have a limited, especially when you're building it. You start off building it for one particular BU. You start building it for one particular use case, and then it grows. Just like how we do MVPs in B2C, right? That process is very very similar. I'm just trying to draw parallels so you can understand between B2B and B2C and
Yeah.
internal products. So that process is super similar. Advantage of building internal products, you know who you're building for, you have a certain mandate. Problem statement also to a certain extent is a lot more defined. That's how I look at it, and that's been my
Yeah.
learning so far. Definitely a lot of challenges come with that as well, right? um, because you have some amount of structure, there are lots more expectations here, right? um, Stakeholder management is another thing that goes a very long way in B2B, because most of the funding that comes for building these comes internally. um, I'm learning as well. I think my designation here is of an analyst, but we have a bunch of like very very senior people on the team, right? From who I get to learn, get to interact with on a daily basis. So I think that is one exposure that I've really valued, and I think that has helped me build a little more on a long term thinking. Right, when I was working with a startup, um, we were figuring it out maybe every week, right? That's how things change. Like today we're working on something, but we realize, okay, here it was very 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 much on the market. But here I think mandates are set, so I think there are clear differentiations, advantages, disadvantages on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
um, my users are my internal PepsiCo employees, like just to put it out there. I think that's looping back to your first question.
Yeah.
um, Internal PepsiCo users for now.
You know, I've always found that to be very interesting, and to be honest, I find that to be more challenging. Apart from whatever is the known norm in the market, I think for the audience listening, if you ever read about product management, you will come across these terms B2C, B2B, and internal products. and it
Right.
sounds very fancy when you say, okay, I'll build for the customers. But technically, customers are everyone. So in everybody has their own customer. And I found the best PMs out there building for internal products. Your search experience is an internal product. So
Yeah.
uh, it's just fascinating to know. And I have always shied away from it, to be honest, because I think it's more difficult for me. Uh, but moving to what the audience might be looking for, and from the experience that you have had with product folks, you shared that you guys grew and got the great community support. But that also would have come with a lot of learning from the product community itself, because you get to
Right.
interact with a lot of PMs on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
So if you could describe what are the three things that should not be done by a PM that you
Yeah.
found out while you were building this community, as well as when you're interacting with this community.
Got it. Got it. Got it. I'll generalize it a little bit, but I'll still keep it a little edgy.
Sure.
These are my learnings for the last 2 years, right? First one is around people looking to break into product. I think one thing that I've learned is you really need to nail it down, right? If you are looking to get into your big four, right? Someone who's looking to get into Google, the very simplest way is, hey, get onto LinkedIn. And I'm not talking about outlier cases here. I'm talking for the 90% cases. That get onto LinkedIn, go check out career paths. That's the simplest thing you can do, right? Uh, even today, and there's only increasing, right? Most of the coveted product management opportunities still go via top B schools, right? This is something you and me will agree with, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, maybe not in our cases. I agree. I have maybe not from our personal cases, but you'd agree in terms of the environment that you've seen around you, right? If I can ask you, what is the percentage split at, say, a Flipkart, or the companies you've worked at, or the companies that I have worked at, uh, you need. I mean, people really need to go out there, and or we need to build that resource, right? As TPF, as a community, we need to build out that resource, because this was something that was not very clear to me upfront, right? I always thought, hey, I mean, conceive a company, like whichever company that you're going to. Uh, just hustle your way through it, right? But that hustling your way through has its constraints. I'm not saying you can't do it, and there is
Mhm.
that 10% who always gets through, but you need to put in that effort, right? If you are competing, say you want to get into that top 15 startups, you are competing with the same guys who've cracked an ISB, right, a CAT exam, who've cracked a top 5 B school exam, right? So they've done that hustle, then they work for the next 1-2 years into really learning. They are competing at that level. So think of it, right? If you both are sitting for the same opportunity, you need to put in one additional layer of effort, because you don't have that credential, right?
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
want to take that same opportunity. So that was a big learning, and I think a lot more people need to speak about it, right? On Twitter, on LinkedIn, it's very simple to talk about the glorification of product management, and we are culprit to that as well. I'm not disagreeing to that. But I think this is something that I haven't said enough, and I feel like more people should really like help other people in this space, right? You can help
Yeah.
people as much as you want, but unless that changes top down, right?
Yeah.
You can talk about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of talks that senior PMs can come and do with TPF, with other communities, right? Help people learn. That is awesome, right? But the second time, you can write hundreds and hundreds of posts on LinkedIn saying that these are the ways to break into product. And when hiring seasons come at your company, you're the first one to go on that D0, fight for that D0 spot on a B school, right? So where does that line? Like, call it out. It's completely okay. I'm saying it's completely okay to hire from there as well. And if that is the norm, that is the norm, right? Let
Yeah.
it be that. But call it out, right? If you want to change something, let it not be just on your LinkedIn post. Let it not be on your Twitter post. Do something about it, right? That is
Yeah.
my first learning overall. But I think things are changing now. Like, there are
Yeah.
a couple of really good boot camps. There are a couple of really good hiring managers who really push for diversity beyond credentials, and that's a good sign to see. First learning. Second is the quality of people graduating from colleges looking to break in, right? That APM positions as well is phenomenally high today to what it was maybe even 4 years back. The amount of effort they are putting, I've seen this firsthand, right? 6 months back is where we launched the first teardown series to today, right? And there are third year bit students, right? Phenomenal decks, right? The amount of product thinking that goes, the amount of time they put into. I'm calling it out because one of them won and got a offer at Grofers, right? Which is
Yeah.
a pretty good startup to work for right out of college, and to do this without credentials. So I feel like the larger generation really needs to put in that effort. It is not about A lot of times we hear, okay, you need to write blog posts, you need to do this, you need to do that. Maybe, right? That is one way of doing it, but you need to put in that effort. Lots of other people are putting that in. So that's a good sign in the ecosystem. Uh, Third one is, in general, I feel like it's still a little broken, right? What we can really improve here is, these kind of sessions need to have an outcome. You and me are sitting here probably today trying to help a couple of early stage folks know a little bit more about product management, but what next, right? They know about product management, but what next? Where do they reach out? What do they do next? um, Probably now I do see a lot more resources out there. Is there a better way for folks to discover this? Somewhere I feel like there's a lot more exposure in your top 5 6 colleges, and I'm keeping these 3 points very relevant to our audience. If we can talk about PMs in general, I think you and me can talk about a lot more things, but there's
Yeah.
something that they will be able to connect to. So right, to summarize, that third point is like, put in hustle. There are lots of amazing folks out there. Um, you guys, I mean, your seniors as well have broken into product roles. Talk to them, understand what product management is all about. It's very interesting. So lots of opportunities at early stage startups that you can definitely get into. Lots of resources out there. Pick it off from the first page of Google, right? If you just hit how do I break into product management, you'll have, Lenny's article, Man's article on the first page of Google. Hit that up. You don't really have to reach out and ask people on LinkedIn, hey, this is my profile, can you just check my resume, can you refer me? Like, do your effort, right? Do your hard work upfront, and reach out with specifics. People are there to help, right? If you ask Vipul, I'm pretty sure he mentored a bunch of folks who wanted to break into Flipkart. Now he probably, matter of fact, he might also be hiring, so just keep your eyes out. But put your effort, right? When you are reaching out, put in, you want to be that differentiator, right? So how can you be a little different, right? All of y'all are smart for sure. Y'all are studying at one of the best UG schools in India. So how can you differentiate yourself from the 300, 400, 500 other people in only your college? Forget other colleges. How can you differentiate? Just figure that one element so that people really sees your profile and like, hey, yes, this is the guy I really want to have a chat with, right?
Yeah.
So yep, that's to summarize it.
No, thanks, Suhas. I think that's hits home on actually what I wanted to extract out from you. Just one thing that I would like to add, which I can't stress enough, just to add to your point, is hustling, right? Just figuring out who to talk to and what to talk about is very critical. So basically, as a PM, you will have to do research, be it any product line, any startup, anywhere you go. So why don't you actually become a PM for yourself and first research where do you want to head? What are the interesting domains that you find? And try to put down three, four, five companies in each domains that you might find exciting. It might just be exciting because of the domain. It might just be exciting because they have raised some money. It might just be exciting because there is a senior there. But if you can actually just research for 2 hours about some of these, and then if you reach out to someone, let's say Suhas, and say, hey Suhas, I want to actually get to learn to know about how what does a community product look like. By the way, these are the things that I know about it, and these are the things that I would like to understand more about. I think that just makes the context so much easier for you to be able to, have a conversation with. Because if they don't actually know about it, they will be able to also direct you to someone else that can help you. So that initial bit of effort, hustle, and research that you put into your career and job hunt will take you a long way in helping you differentiate.
I think
All
yeah,
right.
100% agree. I think Vipul, I think nail that, right? Today, LinkedIn has made it easier for that first level, right? You can reach out to anyone with a message, but what next, right?
Yeah.
That is equally important. So if someone responds to you, how can you make the best use of that 15 minutes? That is equally important. Great that you brought that out.
Yeah, no, and just for the audience reference, all of us actually filter. All of us who talk to other people, mentor, guide, looking to hire, all of us filter. Not just because we are judgmental, not just because we are looking at the creamy layer, not just because we are looking for the smartest folks. I think it's just because everybody has a limited set of time, right? So if you can show to the person that you value their time and you build the right context and then you deliver the message as well, That's exactly what product management is about. So those are early signs that anybody loves to have.
Yep, agree. I think I was on mute. The button really needs to get fixed. But
Yes.
yep, I think that was awesome. I think chatting with you there, Vipul. I think we're just hitting the 50-minute mark, so would love to invite some questions, Aditya, in case you're around. If there are
Yeah,
any questions.
yeah, we do have a few questions, and thank you guys. That was actually a very insightful session. Um, we have some questions from some of our viewers, and the first question is, how can one transition the principles of product management to ensure a successful startup launch?
Contextual, if there's any context someone can share around that. I think super broad question for, I mean, I'm sure Vipul would have interpreted it in one way, I would have interpreted, but if you could share some context around what startup you're building, we'd be happy to help you there. But Vipul, do you want to take a shot in case if it's a general question?
Yeah, I also interpreted it very differently, right? But it's if the question was about how do I evaluate if my idea is good enough, there is nothing better than actually to be able to do it in a way that you don't have to build something, but you should be able to test it out. A very simple example is, let's say you want to build something around a community. It's very easy to build an app and then do all the things. But before that, can you actually make a WhatsApp group? And can you see that if that use case or the idea that you were thinking about gets traction on that WhatsApp community itself? And then try to learn what are the things that people are expecting, what are the things that can work and cannot work, so that you can decide if this is something valuable for you to extrapolate and build a product into. So I'm just trying to take it up as an example. If the question was about if I have a broad thought, how do I narrow it down? And the best way to do that is build a small use case, or experiment with a small use case, to be able to validate if this has value enough. And at that point you don't have to be myopic, because there are things that can work with 50 users, 100 users, but when it has to go to 1,000 users, 10,000 users, it may break or it may not have the same value. So you also have to keep evaluating and keep thinking that is there a larger market, or is a different kind of user that I can get to with the same product or the same idea that I am building. Just my 2 cents on if the question was about how do I broadly evaluate an idea.
Nice, nice.
Okay, I hope that answers the question. I mean, like Vipul and Sahas said, it is a pretty general question, but I think you did deliver the gist. And we have another question. Could you please talk about how you overcame product failures, challenges or failures with product and poor feedback? How do you cope with that?
So as you want me to take that, because I have too many of those.
Go for it. Go for it. Go for it.
Uh, I'll be honest here. A product manager can talk about all the jazz. You can think about the best product out there, uh, all on your PPT, all in your design. But the most amount of learning that a PM actually gets when the rubber hits the road, when you put it in front of your user, is where the truth lies. And a lot of times you fail. But what you have to understand is that that failure also is that learning that you have to take back and try to evaluate on what part did it fail on. Did it fail on the core value proposition? Did it fail on usability? Did it fail on people not understanding my product? So you have to be able to assess that failure and then come out of it to be able to decide if I have to improve this product to make a success, or I have to be able to scrap that and move on. And those are very tough decisions to make, because when you build a product, it becomes your child, and some of us who are passionate about it just get too attached to it. So it's difficult to let go. But that's how I look at those failures, and that's how I've learned to cope with it. Suhas, do you want to add? Because this is, I think, a very critical aspect that a lot of us struggle with.
Yep, I think you covered it from one aspect. I'd probably share it from, um, a very, very small team perspective as well, right?
Yeah.
Maybe Flipkart and PepsiCo, I can draw parallels, but I'll give you one from, say, the Indistractable journey, right? It's just two of us learning, working on that project. So, um, how I see it as the resources that we have is very limited, right? Compared to the other side of things, where it's deep product, where you can call it an experiment. A failure can be called an experiment, right? In our case, each experiment that we do, we have limited resources. Just two of us working on it, so um, those constraints are a lot higher. So it's equally important for us to figure out. But at the same time, what I'd say is, uh, without failures, I see very few products that are a one shop hit, right? Very, very few. Like so many that I see around, working with a bunch of other people, is very, very iterative. Like very few who would have got it on the first nick. um, we all know how many pivots even funded startups go through, so don't be worried about a product launch not going the right way that you figured, that you thought it might have. This happens to most product launches, right? All the shebang that you see maybe goes away in 2 weeks, and 2 months later, 6 months later, people figure out. So pivots are not easy, but failures are just part of that journey. That's what I'd say. um, Before we came up with, okay, today I think we're on track to hit maybe 500k downloads, all organic. But there have been lots of roadblocks to even figure out, hey, is this something that we really want to build? Is this the next feature that we really want to build? Because it takes us a month and a half to build that, and no one's using it, we need to remove it, right? So it just sets us back for another 3 months, right? That's not where we want to be. So um, think about it. Like honestly, I think it's just part and parcel of the game. Don't take it too seriously. um, and if you see in the retro, a lot of things tie back. Like I love this quote that I think Steve Jobs had said at um, one of the graduation ceremonies. I could share a link in the chat section. All of it makes sense in the retro. It's very, very difficult to point it out today. So unless you really go take that decision, unless you make that first step, you aren't you'd rather make that fail and then grow out of it than not trying at all. So just go for it is my first take on this, obviously with context, but that's my take on it.
So kind of like you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. I think that's the
Exactly.
gist of what you're trying to say. Yeah. So another question we have is, what kind of questions do you need to ask to evaluate an idea and analyze the market for the product?
I think Suhas, you should take this up.
Yeah,
Given
I can take that.
yeah, you've been
I,
you've
I,
been very interestingly pivoting in different markets and different ideas recently.
right. Aditya, if you could tell me a little more about what you think that would mean, I can take that question.
So I believe what the question is trying to ask is that when you're looking to make an entry into a particular market, what kind of questions, what kind of metrics, what kind of I'd say scenarios are you looking at to try to put to basically define the market for that product? What is the size of that
Got it.
market? Who is the market for that product? So yeah.
Got it. Okay, thanks for sharing that. um, how we look at it is, parallel markets is what we look at. We don't try very, very contrast markets to start off with, right? Especially when you have launched, and this could be like very, very specific BUs as well within a particular market, right? We look at parallels, so it's easy to launch because you take some learnings from every market before you launch in the next. Uh, Very common example can be based on demographics, can be based on ARPU, can be based on lots of factors. Now again, depends on which product you are launching. Uh, for us, okay, I'll give you an example from Indistractable. Ours is Android only, right? Two ways to figure this out is how we do it. I'll tell you about how we do it. There is probably tons of different ways to do it. Um, we see our top three markets, right? Initially, when we launched, it wasn't a constraint, right? We didn't go with, hey, there's an India only product, there's a product for Bharat, right? We were not that product. We knew our user segment, we knew who's going to purchase it. We talked to, at least in the initial days, we spoke to at least 30 users every day between the two of us, right? So that helped us set our first market, right? And like I said earlier, ours was not a geographical constraint to start with, but beyond a certain stage, you have enough data to tell you where, and we also launched premium a couple of months back, right? So for us now, the metrics that we want to move will be two ways, right? One is how do we grow the top of the funnel? How do we get more users to use our platform? But at the same time, it's very important for us to grow some revenue so that, we can sustain this product as well. And I can tell you our top three markets, like it's currently US, Germany, and UK, right? So if you could do a quick poll, where do you think our fourth, or if we need to focus on, we're not going to do a particular launch. I think we're beyond that scale to do a particular launch. But what do you think our fourth country that we should be focusing on? You can tell me after the thing also. I don't have a direct site, but if any of y'all want to chat about it, I can go into specifics on how we're looking to launch that fourth market. But on a very, very generic view, just to give you guys an idea, we will draw parallels based on this. I can tell you for sure we're not going to focus on India. That is one thing I can tell you for sure. And now you can figure out why. I've told you my top three markets that are paying me. I've told you what is the metric I'm focusing on, right? And I'll give you a counter example. This is not from Indistractable, but a lot of times when people are focusing on, say, an India only app, right? Figure out metrics on what is the next destination. You will often see Brazil to be a market. You'll see a lot of apps which are Android only to be launched in two places, which is either a country in South Africa. I think Twitter does this a lot, right? So many launches are not in the US first, which is contrary, right? So I could definitely take an example. I took Indistractable so you guys could understand. Um, from a PepsiCo point of view, lots of things are very, very different. If there are any other questions that you guys have, keep it super contextual. It's easier to get to it, and we could share some examples. But Indistractable is the closest that I could share something with. PepsiCo for sure, but offline, not online. Vipul, do you want to add in something from the Flipkart scenario?
No, well, I have a very general framework that I have tried to evolve on, but I think all you said is applicable. Uh, in general, what we think about and look at is, what's the target segment? So as you said, demographic, right? You'll have to first start figuring out who's your ideal customer. Uh, that should first start telling you if there is a large enough market in which specific geography or in which specific segment, right? In India also is a big enough market, and inside that as well, there is a metro customer which is completely different than a tier one customer, than a tier two customer, right? So you have to first try to define and identify who would use my product. For example, if you're building something which is going to be used by, let's say, parents, then I think it will be very easy for you to be able to define that what kind of parents will use this. And then from there, you can go to, okay, what percentage of parents will be in metro who would potentially use it? What kind of parents would maybe exist in tier one, tier two cities who might use it? And then you start identifying, is this a large enough market for what I'm building, which can be married together to become a sustainable or a revenue generating product or not? So this is just a very high level framework that you can apply. Funnily enough, we try to do this in guesstimates, right? But when we have to build an actual product, it becomes a much more difficult problem to solve.
Right, I think
Exactly.
we covered quite a lot of bases over here. I think we have time for two more questions. So one of our questions is, I think both of you are very fit to answer this question. How does having an engineering degree affect your job as a product manager? Would you be at an advantage or a disadvantage compared to someone with an MBA?
You can't really compare an engineering to an MBA. I was hoping he'd say. My first answer to that was it's obviously you're on the advantage. Lots of product managers are MBA graduates in India. Are a lot of engineering graduates are product managers in India. So you're not in the disadvantage. But Vipul, I don't think we'd compare an engineering to an MBA, right? Engineering to different non-engineering fields would be a good comparison. MBAs are definitely a good add-on, in my opinion, even though I think both of us haven't done it. That's just from my point of view.
Yeah.
A top tier MBA is definitely a plus point.
Yeah,
Vipul?
so I think it's just coming from somebody who's in the engineering scene right now, mostly in college. So uh, I'll clarify. It's not necessarily advantageous for you to be an engineer if you want to become a product manager, because what ends up happening is if you start thinking about a product from a solution perspective, which is how would I engineer this? If that's your starting step, then I think engineering is best for you because that's something that you will enjoy a lot more. Product management might seem lucrative, might seem fancy, but if you are someone who's, ingrained in, okay, I want to build and solve and code for this, then product management is something that you should not evaluate because you may not enjoy it as much. Uh, Funnily, a lot of my engineers used to tell me that you just talk, man, and PPTs. What else do you do? So, just giving you a flavor of what it might look like from the inside. Uh, the second thing is, it's not disadvantageous as well if you're an engineer compared to MBA, for example, right? Because it's just that a B school degree gives you a heads up, maybe, or it gives you a little more frameworks. That is something that you can develop, as I talked about practice, right? You can develop on your own over a period of time. And that's how you should look at it. So you're not at advantage, you're not at a disadvantage. You are at the position of the effort and smartness that you put into the job hunt or cracking the interview or the role that you're looking at.
Vipul has taken a very diplomatic stand to this, but guys, I'll tell you a very simple hack to this is go to LinkedIn, right? Uh, do a very simple qualitative, forget quantitative, right? You can also script through, download the data and do a quantitative. I think we recently did like a quantitative study for 300 APMs who've just converted to PM jobs in the US, right? We'll probably release that as a report as well, but it's a very small subset. We wanted to understand something, but you can do a very quick qualitative. Go through the first 4 pages, put companies in the filter of the companies you want to get into, right? Say these are the top 15 startups. Just take even if you don't know the name of the company, go to your story, go to LinkedIn, see the top companies that they have released, put a filter on those companies, right? This is the company dream companies that many people want to work at. See the career paths qualitatively. No one needs to be a data analyst, no one needs to know anything. Just see qualitatively what has been the transaction. Write down just a very simple column: engineer 10. Yes, is he an engineer, is he not? Is he an MBA graduate? 10. Share that with me, right? I'm happy to brainstorm with you honestly, right? Do it just for first 30-40 profiles you come across, right? And you can put also, if you want to filter, head of product, right? Let's see this. I can guarantee you it, you're not at a disadvantage. That is one thing for sure. But I also agree with Vipul's point on like the solutioning bit, right? It's probably you're not at a disadvantage to break into product, but if you want to succeed in your role, 100% agree with what Vipul is saying. It's a nuanced point. It is probably not something that you'll relate to today, but it is definitely true that lots of things that if we like, with that mindset, with the product mindset, you would start with solutions first. We all are, as engineers, we know we know what everyone wants, right? That's the bias with which a lot of us build. So it's a nuanced take, but it's absolutely true. So you're not at a disadvantage would be the most diplomatic way to put it, but I'd still say that you have an edge. Go for it.
I think Suhas has already I think Suhas has already given you guys an assignment, just tactically. So yeah, definitely ping him and tell him what the stat looks like. But to be honest, Suhas, I think the game has changed also now from where it was before. If you were an engineer 4 years, 5 years back when I was coming in, and I'm not talking about the Googles of the world because of course they don't evaluate it that way. I had a huge disadvantage because nobody wanted to touch me from a 10-foot pole as well. But that's primarily because you didn't have that fancy degree. And I'm glad that that dynamic has changed a lot in the industry now. So maybe we're just looking at lagging indicators, as we call it as PMs, because future, I don't think right now there's a specific way of saying that you're at an advantage or a disadvantage. It's basically how you choose to operate with it.
Don't disagree. I think I agree with you there. But if anyone's interested in the data, I'm still interested. Probably as a future point of view, yeah, definitely things are changing, no doubt about it. Lots more opportunity. Um, but in a present, like you mentioned, like over the last couple of years, things have been changing. But in today's scenario, um, let's see if the data tells us anything.
Okay, we have time for one last question, guys. So what is the one quality that you look for when hunting for a potential product manager, and how could a candidate in general impress you? And since you guys talked about LinkedIn a lot, how does someone impress you on LinkedIn?
People, do you want? I have a take on this. Do you want to start?
No, I think you should go ahead.
Because we mentioned LinkedIn so many times, I'd say if you don't reach out to any of us on LinkedIn and figure a different way to reach out, that would be interesting. Number one, but don't do that. Like honestly, as now that I've said it, now don't do it. But the second thing is do something. That's all I'd like to say. That um, you will have an edge in any, not only when you reach out to us, but be a product manager before you can ask for a position. Create that position, right? Especially if you're not going the traditional route of applying, right? Don't reach out saying that, hey, I've seen this position on your website, can you refer me? I mean, we'd be glad to refer you, no doubt about it. But if you want to stand out, that impression, you have a lot of, and especially when you're in college, right? You have a lot more time. You have the benefit of doubt that you don't have this data, right? But there's so much available online. Can you do a little bit and then reach out? That I think just puts you in one category above, and that's the plain thing. I don't think uh, as Vipul said, I think personally, I don't think credentials is something that matters to us personally. Still has to change in the industry, but that is changing. But that also means that there's lots more in the market for you to differentiate from. Like if you were earlier trying to differentiate with 500 people, today there might be 5,000, 50,000, right? So that is just my base layer. Figure out a different channel, something that is not crowded. Do something, do the PM role before you can do. You don't, it doesn't have to be extensive, it doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't have to be uh, it can be close. The closer you can get, the easier your convo gets. So put in some time, put in some time, put in some effort, do the role before the role. And that's just the baseline that I'd like to share. Vipul?
Yeah, I completely agree with Suhas, which is do the role before you actually reach out for the role. And that may not be necessarily true at all points, right? Which is, uh, if you're trying to get into product management, I think we talked about practice, we talked about how you can do all of that. Uh, One hack that I would like to share. I wouldn't say that impresses me or Suhas. I don't know about Suhas, but one of the tips that I got from a friend a long time ago was that uh, she used to write, and she'll never reach out on LinkedIn. She would try to figure out alternate ways to reach out to the person because LinkedIn's crowded, inbox full, all of that becomes a problem. And once you figure out that alternate way of reaching out, uh, they would frame the subject line as to what you need as a company, what you need as a manager. And then they would go on to define what are the things that you might be lacking as a product, what are the things that you think that they think users might be finding difficult to do, and then they will also give them 2 or 3 liners about different solutions that you can try, which is very similar to what Suhas said, right? Which is be the product manager before you can do that. And I'll be honest, that's the best hook that you can get from anyone. And it's okay to try, to do this iteratively as well. See, as all product managers and leaders will tell you, right? Product management is about metrics and numbers. So here is a number. If you do this 10 times and you get a hit once, that's still successful because you've gotten a 10% conversion. That's how you have to think about it in terms of numbers. So you do it 5 times, you get a hit, great. If you're not getting it, change your approach, try something else which might work. Try to study who you are trying to reach out to, see what their interest might lie, where the what the product that they are building, what the industry they are in, and see what you can write to them about, which can, help give them a distinctive impression of you. So simply speaking, try it 5 times. If you don't get any, change your approach. That's called experimentation. You experiment with a different approach. All you have to do is do it enough number of times to get really good at it.
Great point. I think that was that's it, right? Figure out that funnel and go for it. Aditya, I think
Yeah, thank you so much, guys, for answering very, very interesting questions. I'm pretty sure all of our viewers who are present right now and who will watch it later on will find this session very, very insightful. And thank you for giving us your time today. And thank you, everyone, to whoever have joined us today on our stream. Thank you so much for tuning in. And we love your support. We appreciate your support. And that brings our session to a close for today.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Guys, if you liked it, do hit the thumbs up on that YouTube channel. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. So these boys
Please,
have been
yeah.
doing a fantastic job. I think putting out this content together. They've been hustling behind the scenes. So I think it'll really motivate them. Share it with your friends. Even subsequent, I think Aditya and team, you guys have a bunch of sessions coming up, right? So
Yeah,
subscribe.
we do.
You'll be able to attend. Not only like what's planned over the next 2-3 days, but even over the next couple of months. They have interesting stuff coming up for you all. If you all are interested, do DM them. Get involved in the club. I think they've been running a fantastic. I think I was part of it even last year. Uh, they've been doing some fantastic stuff. So DM Aditya and the rest of the team. I think everyone I can see backstage hustling through this. So thanks so much for putting this together. Thanks Vipul for agreeing to be a part of this. I think this was fantastic. And yep, thanks again Aditya. I'll see you soon.
Thank you,
Thanks,
And
guys.
guys, feel
Aditya.
Thank
free to
you.
reach out if in case of anything, in case that Vipul and me can help you with anything, feel free to reach out. I think we're super accessible on Twitter. Yep, all the best. See you on the product side.